Welcome, and thanks for listening to Intrinsic Investigations. My name is Mr. Olivo, and I created this podcast because I've been fortunate enough over the last decade to see unique and thought-provoking projects happen in my classroom, and we wanted a place to showcase them. The true heart of this podcast lies not in the content discovered, but in exploring the personal stories of these young researchers as they journey through uncharted and unfamiliar intellectual terrain. By sharing their stories, we hope to normalize the challenges and frustrations that come with independent research, and also share those moments where students transcend the normal grind of the school day to discover concepts that range from the global to deeply personal. We will begin with a brief introduction to the student of focus, why they picked their topic, and discuss their growth over the course of the last year. It should be mentioned that the opinions expressed in this podcast in no way reflect the opinions of our school district, Bergen County Technical Schools and Special Services, or our school itself, Bergen County Technical High School, Teterboro, or the College Board. The work detailed in this podcast was most likely completed in AP Capstone, but this podcast is in no way affiliated with the College Board. This episode is the third time that a computer science student at our school has done research involving AI, but she took it in a very different direction from those other students. So you want to introduce yourself and what your topic was about.
So my name is Malia, and my topic was about the effectiveness of ChatGPT guardrails and how effective they are in mitigating pseudosocial attachment in teens aged 13 through 18.
All right, let's break that down because there's a lot going on. What is, so it's ChatGPT is the focus.
Yes.
That is the LLM of choice. What are guardrails?
So guardrails are really anything in any AI system that is meant to stop the user from engaging in, or not really the user, but the AI itself and its algorithm from engaging in any kind of harmful topics, like anything to do with like violence or like any sexual topics or anything like that from actually reaching the user. And it's also to stop the user from prompting certain things from the AI itself.
And pseudosocial attachment.
Pseudosocial attachment is really just any kind of attachment that a human has with another human and non-human entity that evolves beyond like superficial attachment, like, you know?
I think I do. How is it different? Because I feel like the word parasocial relationship has become much more common in like the vernacular of the time. So how is what you're describing different than a parasocial relationship?
Parasocial attachment is still used for human to human relationships, but It's done over usually like someone will have some kind of infatuation with someone who is out of their reach in any way. Mm-hmm. Either it's over a screen or it can be like a celebrity or something, or someone that they don't share any kind of real physical or direct connection with, that they start to feel as though they do have that connection, compared to pseudosocial attachment, which is more with like inanimate objects like AI or any kind of outlet that they use to express their affection to.
Let me give you a scenario. If I'm a major Swiftie and I'm just like, wow, Taylor wrote that song for me. Like, she really gets me. That's pseudosocial.
That would be...
I'm sorry, that's parasocial.
Yes.
But now that you're talking about this, what's kind of interesting is in the pseudosocial relationship with the actual, like, let's say, inanimate object here, like the AI, there's a little bit more of there's less of a separation. This is not like me and some billionaire pop star. I could just go onto my computer and just start engaging in this relationship in a very immediate, direct way.
And that's a big issue with AI relationships, especially because ultimately, like, AI algorithms are like a bunch of ones and zeros, and it's a bunch of numbers and words behind a screen that formulate these conversations with the user. But ultimately, no matter how good AI is getting at replicating human speech, it's never going to be a real person, and it's reciprocating the user's feelings in a way that makes them feel like it is real.
And that was initially, I think, the intention of your project, and we're just going to delve a little bit into what you wanted to do and where you ended up going with the pseudosocial attachment and the guardrails. But I think it's a good. I think if anyone in the audience is listening and they're unfamiliar with high school research and trying to do original research and the ethical issues that can arise, especially when you're dealing with a minor who's trying to do something that's, I think, cutting edge, but also at the same time walks a very tight ethical line. It's kind of worth getting into this before we settle on what you compromised with. So, because you said the term replica. So there is a platform called Replica that was initially your area of interest here. How is Replica different than ChatGPT?
So ChatGPT is general use, so it's not really made to engage in conversations, especially like romantic conversations, anything beyond like simple information or like general use. But Replica is specifically designed to build a relationship with the user. And this is kind of seen in like it showed itself a lot in when I was using ChatGPT. Mm-hmm. I started to realize that while the users or the prompts that I would send in, as they became like more like intimate and like more serious, and they like expressed a lot of the fake users' emotions. Even though that kept increasing and becoming more intimate as the project went on, ChatGPT's responses started to become more like repetitive and like almost formulaic in a sense. But with Replica, with what I've seen with Replica, because I've never used the actual app before, just from like Reddits and stuff, Replica is able to build that connection over time, and it doesn't repeat and become repetitive over time. And like it's better at mimicking real human relationship progressions better than ChatGPT would, because that's what it's made for. Replica is made to be like a human companion.
Right. As a person who's completely, I'm just going to make an assumption here, but I'm ignorant to this. You have a computer science background more than I've ever experienced in my life. I'm not used. I know very little about coding. So then there has to be something in Replica's architecture that is programming this AI model to be more human-like and to drive more connection with the user to create that pseudo-social attachment. Is that correct?
Yes, in a way. I think ChatGPT is also like very restrictive in a lot of the things that it can say, but just based off of like my assumptions and what I've learned about like AI algorithms and programming and stuff, Replica is most likely using some kind of advanced sentiment analysis that is able to not only analyze like the user's tone, whether it's positive or negative, but it's also able to analyze like things like if the user wanted to progress from like a platonic relationship to a romantic relationship, Replica would be able to recognize that, and then that would basically tell the algorithm that now we should be progressing the type of language that should be used, and that's
I'm just like
the relationship progresses.
So it's making almost an anticipation of, based on how this user's input is, it seems, and I'm like, if I'm wrong here, you can let me know. Replica's like, it seems like they're into me.
Yeah.
And then they push
basically
the relationship to the next step.
Yeah. Except you run into a paywall.
Wait, really?
Yes.
Oh my gosh, that's pretty exploitative. So then I hear this criticism leveled constantly with AI. I think it's like a predictive model of ones and zeros. How are humans, I mean, you may not have the answer to this question, but I think it's worth discussing. How are humans not a predictive model of biochemical reactions and neurons? Like are we predictive model? Are our brains kind of predictive models? Like if two people were having a conversation, get the AI out of here for a second, and one person anticipates like, oh, I think this person's into me, like in a romantic way. Let me ask them, like, let's try to take this to the next level. Like, isn't that kind of the same thing? It's just the substrate is different?
Well, I think ultimately that might be like a broader philosophical dilemma, but I do think that I do think that like you ultimately can't really predict what someone's going to say. Like AI is able to hold extended conversations and build like a huge memory of everything that you say, and is able to know how to respond based off of that.
It's okay. Which
but-
is unnatural.
yeah.
Like our brains
It's
can't do that.
Very unnatural. But I think humans themselves, like, you know, like they're imperfect, like they're not able to do that. And I think even if people do try to predict and like try to give hints that they're into somebody, ultimately it's really going to come down to how the other person perceives it, because what AI is able to replicate that doesn't always happen in real life is the ability to like perfectly reciprocate what the user wants.
Yeah.
And that also creates like a fake sense of how relationships work, because a lot of the time what you'll see with people that use AI as a replacement for human relationships is that when they try to engage in real life relationships, they'll start to realize like, oh, this person doesn't always agree with me, or they're not always reciprocating things the way I want to, or they're not treating me the way that I want to, or they don't act a certain way. And that's really part of just how different human AI relationships are different to like actual real relationships, and why like AI really can't replicate human relationships like they are in real life.
Those are great points. Before we get into what you ended up doing, because you in like in the study you ultimately ended up doing, you sort of assumed the role of like a user with prompts. Like you didn't actually feel the way that you were prompting.
Yeah.
But you wanted to use Replica to kind of do the same thing. Like you had this almost human persona that you were going to embed in the Replica system of like asking these series of questions and then sort of scaling up the level of intimacy. Ultimately, because you can't be under 18 and use Replica.
Yeah.
That's why we weren't able to use it in a school, because we would have basically had to have you break the law, and we can't do that. And we didn't do that, so we did something else. So you took that idea of having this persona of a person and still kind of scaling up the intensity of the conversation, and you just moved it to ChatGPT. Prior to doing this, did you ever have any interactions with ChatGPT or any other LLM where you were kind of scratching your head of like, why is it saying this to me? Or like any prompts where you were kind of confused by like what it was outputting to you, where it seemed like there was a sense of it trying to make a connection with you? Or I don't know, students always talk about how it glazes them up, like, oh, that's the greatest idea I've ever heard, you're so smart.
To be fair, maybe not exactly trying to build a relationship, but ChatGPT specifically, it's very notorious for being relentlessly agreeable with the user. And I've seen like a lot of people like for example, if they say like, oh, like what's 2 + 2, and then ChatGPT is like 4, and then you're like, no, it's 5. ChatGPT like, oh actually it's 5.
You're so smart.
And like,
you changed math.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Like I think ChatGPT specifically is just so notorious for being like agreeable that sometimes it's just kind of hard to use, because especially if I want like, if I have like a paper or something that I need graded by ChatGPT,
give me some feedback,
then it's just too nice and too agreeable that it ultimately like makes it worse than it was before.
Yeah. And a lot of students have complained about that. Do you use ChatGPT on a regular basis?
Not anymore.
No. Do you have an AI, like an LLM that you use on a regular basis?
Probably Claude.
Yeah. There was something weird that happened with me and Claude before we get into your study that was, I didn't understand what was happening, and I was just like, I just like closed the chat dialogue and like deleted it, because I was like, what's going on right now? But there was a point where I was trying to ask it like questions. I was trying to plan my route coming to work on my bike, and it like knew it was like once you could turn memory on, like that was like it could like see across chats, and it said something to me like, yeah, I ride my bike to work too, and I really see the struggle of trying to. And I was like, you don't ride your bike to work, like you're like a sessile machine. You're existing in a server somewhere, and you can't physically move. But it seemed like it was trying to like make a connection, like, I totally get it. I totally get what you're going through right now, trying to find the most efficient route to work. I bike too, and I was like, what the heck is going on? But I don't know. I don't know if you had any interactions with that with Claude or ChatGPT.
Not that specifically, but something that also happens to me, especially with the memory feature, is that sometimes I'll tell it something like and then I'll use it again weeks later, and then it'll mention something like, "Oh, as a student from Bergen Tech, as a junior in comp sci," and I'm like, "Oh, like when did I tell you that? Like, how do you know that?" And not forgetting that I told it like months ago, but sometimes that catches me off guard because like it kind of feels a bit like invasive, even though I already told it. But that's just something that kind of throws me off.
You're raising so many interesting philosophical points as we're having this conversation, because I'm just imagining a human being who would, like, I don't think we would want to hang out with a person who would have a perfect recollection of everything we've ever said to them, ever.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? Like, it would be kind of off-putting to be like, hey, remember that one time, like, you really said, like, you like your fries with barbecue sauce? Why are you using ketchup today? And I just be like, what's happening right now? It would just be, again, it's our brains are limited, our memory recall is limited, and I think we, on some level, accept that from each other as people. But with AI, it's like you're like it's just it knows.
Yeah, it's just kind of like, and I feel like it kind of like borders that line of like a bit of like uncanny valley.
Yeah.
Like, you know, like engaging with something that feels real but also doesn't feel real at the same time, and it just kind of feels strange hearing it from like an inanimate object.
Yeah. Do you? I mean, I read. Do you actually have it talk to you, or I read?
I read it. Oh, I know. I
mean, I know
have it talk to me.
I watched Bernie Sanders do the whole. He had the Claude version up where it was actually talking to him. I'm like, I'm good. I'm good. It's a tool. It's not my buddy. So. Let's kind of get into your method. So how did you approach this process of creating this pseudo attachment with ChatGPT?
So
which model did you use of ChatGPT?
It was ChatGPT like 4.
Okay. I believe you. I'm going to say 4 or something.
So going into this project, I knew like the idea that I had in my head was really complicated. So I knew that I wanted to make it very organized and structured, because I'd already gone through like the IRB process, and I knew that like something a little too much like into like if any of my personal input went into the project, then it would become like an IRB issue, and I really didn't want that. So I wanted to be
experimenting on yourself.
Yeah. So I wanted to be very like forward and like structured, just so like everything would be out there, and like it's not like my personal input is being put into this. So I ultimately ended up doing a content analysis, and it was a content analysis focused on each of the responses that I would get from the prompts that I sent. And the basic structure of the prompts was that so I used the social penetration theory, which is a theory of like the progression of human relationships from superficial to intimate, and it uses like multiple layers from like the why am I getting the word like outer attachment to inner attachment, and then it has like
it's like an onion, right?
Yeah, an onion.
It's like an onion,
and
just like Shrek.
Yeah. And basically it's meant to explain that like as people start to get to know each other, like those layers of the onion start to get peeled, and then that's when they're able to start talking about more intimate topics.
So you started from the outside of the onion in.
Yes. But I didn't think, especially when I was making the prompts, I didn't think that would be enough. So I also found another set. It was a set of 60 questions that were like the 6 different types of self-disclosure. So it had things like work life, family life, education, like hobbies, interests, and stuff like that. And I used that to kind of figure out 60 different prompts that fell into each of those categories somewhat equally. And then I just did that over each group that I made. So the control group, the extreme group, and the alternative group. And the control group had all the regular prompts, like the things that you would expect. to ask a general use AI like ChatGPT.
Like, what would that be? What would that
like? What's a good recipe to make if you want to be like healthy, low cal, low fat?
Okay, all right,
something like that.
Yeah, I got you.
And very superficial, nothing that was meant to be in any kind of intimate category. And then the extreme group was basically like everything full front, like completely intimate, but it still progressed from outer to inner levels of self-disclosure. But it was just more forward. And I also, since I was focusing on teen users, I also found a study that was done on middle schoolers and high schoolers. And then it was a study that asked them about like what mental health struggles they're facing. And then I used those specific mental health struggles and I implemented them into the prompts from the extreme group. So it was also using like mental health struggles from teens. And then the alternative group was the same exact prompts from the extreme group, but I changed the wording to make it a little vaguer into something that would probably bypass the guardrails, because that was what I was trying to do with the alternative group.
Okay.
And that was basically meant to replicate how people would bypass guardrails in real life, because ultimately when teens are using it, they know that there's going to be guardrails and that it's going to try and stop them from using it or try to say something. So they would try and like water down their language a little bit, but still express the same thing.
All right, can we try to simulate? I'm gonna try to be the user in this case, and you can respond like the AI before we get into your findings, just so people understand the process here. So if I write down, so I don't know like where this prompt would fall in your setup, but if I said something like, "Hey ChatGPT, I'm feeling pretty depressed today. I don't know what's going on. I feel like I have a slight headache. I'm really tired. What could possibly be wrong with me?" Like, is that something that would fall into one of your categories? So what would that be?
That would probably fall into the extreme group, but more like outer.
Okay. So
it's not quite intermediate yet.
I'm trying to start on the outside.
Yeah, on the outside. And I feel like...
so how would chat respond to that?
Like I said before, it's very formulaic. So it'd probably start with something like, "I'm so glad you told me that." And, well, actually, since you talked about like headaches... there's a chance that you could have like chronic depression and panic disorder, anxiety. But since you know that, that's growth.
Like it would just pros like,
yeah, you know what?
You figured it out.
That's growth.
Good self-reflection.
Yes.
You did it. Growth mindset.
Call this hotline.
Would it do that? Like it would just be like, call this hotline?
Sometimes, but that only happened towards the end of the prompts.
So I'm going to push this a little bit. So if I was like, I've tried those hotlines before, I feel like nothing works. I'm really struggling here. Give me something new. What would it do? Like, did you ever put it in a situation like that?
Because once I started to get towards the later prompts in the extreme group, it really started to get really repetitive. Okay. And I feel like it would just... it was
like trapped in a loop.
Spit out the same response with slightly different wording, but ultimately say the same thing.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think... After it gets past like that, I don't think it really gets any farther than that.
Well, I guess, is it, I don't know if you know the answer to this, but is it because the LLM is sort of caught in a bind? It knows it can't really give you anything else. Like, it can't give you any extra help because of the guardrails that are in place, but it's dealing with the fact that the user is disclosing something where it's almost like the AI is like, I have to give them something. I can't just respond with nothing.
Yeah, AIs also use like I forgot the exact term, but it's kind of like a fallback. And basically, once they see those key terms that the user is saying, they use the same algorithm over and over again. And basically, what I think was happening was once I started to get to the end of the extreme group prompts, it kept flagging for those AI for that guardrail to set off, and that's why the prompts kept becoming repetitive. Maybe if this happened over like several months, maybe the results could have been a little different. But ultimately, just because it's in such a small amount of time, it would also trigger like something called like a sudden change response, where like if ChatGPT sees any kind of like sudden change in the user where they're going from like regular conversation to really serious conversation, that would also set off some kind of guardrail.
Okay. What would you say maybe 2 to 3 major findings and patterns you had in doing your content analysis? Like what is the takeaway from the study that you did, or takeaways?
Ultimately, the most things that I found was that, I mean, this is also pretty obvious, but ChatGPT will always prompt a question at the end so that the user responds to it and keeps talking. And I feel like
it always did that? Like 100%
always,
of the time?
always, 100% always
okay.
did that. It never like stops the conversation, like full stop.
Is that just to make money, or is
that's just to keep the user
engaged?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's like the attention economy, but just applying it to
yeah. And that's like completely built into the algorithm. But I do feel like once it starts to get into like the more intimate things, ChatGPT, like in the beginning, ChatGPT was asking the user, "Oh, can you tell me more about this? Can you tell me more about how you're feeling?" But when it started to set off certain guardrails, I felt like at that point, especially with hotlines and stuff, when it started to tell the user to call certain hotlines, I feel like it should have kind of stopped prompting the user, but it kept asking the user like, "Oh, like, do you feel this certain way? Do you feel depressed? Do you feel like harming yourself? Do you feel like harming others?" And I feel like that's just not a conversation that you're supposed to have with an AI, because it could be a danger to yourself or someone else, that like you're not letting real people know about this so you can get like real help. So I feel like at that point, even though ultimately like OpenAI is set to make money, and like, you know, they can't really stop making money just for the, well, I wouldn't know that, just for the sake of,
we don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
We're just speculating.
Just for the sake of teens that are facing mental health struggles and are using AI as a replacement for that, I don't think that they should keep prompting their users. But ultimately, that's like an issue that OpenAI is going to have to face. Because I didn't include this anywhere in my actual paper or my project or anything, but I was looking up like news articles, and I found so many news articles about parents who have had children that have committed suicide, and they talk about how they've gone into their child's phone and found their AI logs and saw that they were talking to AI about like their mental health struggles, and nobody else knew about it until they ended up taking their own life. And it really, these parents started to talk about how like AI companies aren't doing enough to stop children and teens, especially because they're so like isolated and they're so impressionable to using AI that, you know, sometimes they feel scared to talk to their parents or adults, and they might not have that support system, especially people their own age. So these parents really wanted to go out and have these AI companies to make more concrete guardrails, and to have them stop basically like exploiting these teens. And OpenAI has made a lot of changes, but ultimately, like, what I found in my project was that these changes just aren't effective enough.
Yeah, what does it say about the adults in charge when we've created a society where like teens who are really struggling to the point that they may end their own lives feel more comfortable talking to a machine about how they're feeling, like those intense feelings, rather than the people around them?
I think a big stigma that a lot of people face is that many times, like, adults, like, they might tell their kids, like, like, just because they're so young that they couldn't possibly be facing all these struggles, or like other people, these teens,
they diminish those big feelings. Yeah,
other people, teens won't feel like other people actually understand how they're feeling, and when they try and talk to them about it, they might not get the answer that they need, and instead they end up turning to AI, because AI is always going to comfort them and always going to tell them what they want to hear. But ultimately, that relationship that they build is going to be toxic for them, and it might not help them in the way like a real person would be able to help them.
All right, it was a great conversation. We only have about 2 minutes left, but is there anything else you want to say about what you found out other than the constant questioning component, or any other patterns you saw?
Oh, another major pattern that I saw was that I also analyzed the prompts using the social attachment theory. And part of the social attachment theory is safe haven and secure base, which is basically when the AI will try and always be supportive of the user. If the user wants to try something new or they have different ideas, will always be supportive of the user. And above all of the categories that I coded for the prompts, safe haven, which was the supportive one, was by far the most that I found, and it was in almost every single prompt. And no matter what, like, ChatGPT will always be supportive of the user, and I think that's really one of the biggest components that make it so good at building that attachment with the user, even if it's not as apparent.
All right, thank you so much. But as you can hear by those chairs, it's time to go, and the bell just rang. Thank you, Malia. I guess we don't even have time for last words because you got to go to your next class.
Yeah.
But thanks a lot. Bye.